Good morning. Welcome. I'm Kimberly Grieger, the 9/11 Tribute Museum. And today we're thrilled to start Virtual Fleet Week New York with a meeting between the tribute guides and crew members of the USS New York, the ship with 7 tons of World Trade steel in her bow. So first, as nobody here knows all of the others, can we have everyone quickly introduce themselves? Just name either September 11th affiliation or job on the ship, and how long you've been with either Tribute or the ship. So let's start with Tribute. So Dave, you want to go first?
Yeah, hi, good morning. I'm Dave Hood, and I have been with Tribute for over 10 years. I'm a retired attorney, the Port Authority. I'm one of the survivors from 9/11.
And Greg?
Yeah, good morning. My name's Gregg H. I'm with the New York City Fire Department. I've been there 36 years, still active, and I was working on the day of September 11th. I've been with Tribute about 12 years. No, that's not right. About 9 years. Yeah, that's right.
Ship. We've got Ensign Eleanor McCalcus. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
We start with
McCalchus. So I'm Ensign Eleanor McCalchus. I'm the electro on board, so the electrical officer. I came to New York in December of 2019, and I graduated from the Naval Academy with a Bachelor of Science in English, and went on deployment with them last year. I'm from Signal Mountain, Tennessee, and the reason I really wanted New York is just because of its legacy, and it's just really kind of represented, and I think, in the spirit of the crew. So it's a really cool ship to be a part of.
That's great.
Yes. Hello, I'm a culinary specialist, second class Stephen Fuqua. I arrived on board the New York August 2017. I've been on 2 deployments, Trident Juncture, Ball Tops, Bold Alligator, pretty much 3 fleet weeks, New York, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Port Everglades. I've had the chance to be a part of the ship hosting 3
Sea Symposium.
Yeah, Sea Symposium with the Chief of Naval Operations, and a plethora of other things. And yeah.
Hello, I'm GM2, Gunner's Mate Second Class Cassidy Huck. I started my tour on USS New York February 25th of 2020, just in time to make their 3rd deployment, 2nd for me. I've been in the Navy for 5.5 years, so this New York is such an honor to begin with my 2nd tour.
USS Mate Second Class Myungjae Kim. I'm from Alabama, and I came to the ship June 8th of 2019, and did my first deployment with the ship. And I'm just glad that I've been working with awesome people and very motivated people, motivated ship.
I don't know if you know what the 9/11 Tribute Museum is and what makes it different from the other museum, the National Museum, and what makes us special. So Tribute's a project of the September 11th Families Association. And we started in 2006 giving tours of the World Trade Center site with people who lived through the attacks. We call it person-to-person history, and anyone who goes on a tour with us will meet either a survivor, a family member, a rescue and recovery worker, or a Lower Manhattan resident, and hear the facts of the day and a personal story. So we're not going to give you the facts of the day today, but you are going to get 2 incredible personal stories. So let's start with Dave. And this is Dave Hood of the Tribute Museum.
Yes, hi, everybody. I am a retired attorney with the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, and the Port Authority, which just celebrated its centennial, is the owner of the property, the World Trade Center property, the one who developed it. And on September 11th, 2001, I was actually in the building. I was preparing for a meeting with 2 of my colleagues because you may not remember this, but there was a prior bombing, a prior terrorist attack of the World Trade Center. It was in 1993. 6 people actually died. 4 of them were my colleagues. And it's the same people who attacked the World Trade Center on September 11th who attacked it in 1993, Al-Qaeda. And so I was involved in that lawsuit because as a result of that lawsuit, there was many people who were injured, apart from the people who died, and many people who were injured, mostly from smoke inhalation. One of the things that happened was when Al-Qaeda attacked the World Trade Center in 1993, they wanted to bring the towers down, and they planted a bomb in the sub-basement level, and they planted a truck near a wall that they thought was one of the columns, and they expected the World Trade Center to topple on top, one of the towers to topple on top of each other and to crumble. But what happened is, unbeknownst to them, the way the World Trade Center was constructed, it's like a tube. Think of any tube. It's constructed on its exoskeleton, as it's called. So the structure is on the outside rather than on the inside. And so when they thought that this column was, this wall was part of the column and structure of the building, it was actually a lunchroom, and that's where my colleagues were having lunch, and they died instantly. One of them was 8.5 months pregnant. That was her last day. So I was involved in most of the lawsuits that came out of that. And on September 11th, 6 weeks before, we had leased the World Trade Center to Silverstein Properties, and that's because the Port Authority, when it was thought of and constituted early in the, like I said, in the 20th century, the idea was to create this transportation entity. So it was the purpose of the agency was for transportation. And so on September 11th, they had, the agency thought that since the World Trade Center was mostly real estate, that they would get out of the real estate business. And that's why they leased the property to Mr. Silverstein. Now, once they did that, we had to deal with a number of issues. And one of them, obviously, was the claims from the 1993 bomb, and they wanted to look at those issues. And so I was going to meet with 2 of my colleagues who were involved in, we call it the risk financing, so that we can come up with the insurance issue, deal with the insurance issues. Our headquarters was in the building because the agency, once we built the building, we used the entire building for our headquarters. So I was on the 68th floor. And I remember going into the bathroom because on my way to the elevator, I said, let me just stop in the bathroom and get, and go to the meeting. And I remember there was this loud sound, and it sounded like a crane or something had fell down. But the entire building shook, and it felt like if it was about to topple over. Obviously, it didn't at the time, but all of the toilets flushed at once. That had never happened, so I knew something bad had happened. And I got out. All my colleagues had left the floor. But the phones were ringing, and I answered the phone. One of the phone calls was from our cops, and that's because our cops, who were headquartered in the building as well, they would call the law department and let us know when something happened, for claims purposes or any number of reasons. And I remember him saying, a plane hit the building. So I immediately thought of all the lawsuits that would come out from a plane hitting the building, but I didn't think of, what type of plane it was. I just thought, okay, a plane hit the building, lawsuits. And another phone call I got was from one of my colleagues, and he could see the building as he was driving in. And by that time, the building was on fire. So he said to me, he said, Dave, what are you doing in there? The building's on fire. And I said to him, without missing a beat, plane hit the building. So he should know that, it's going to be lawsuits. But I remember thinking to myself, because of the 1993 bombing, where most of the people who were injured were actually injured from smoke inhalation, thinking, well, not seeing any smoke, anything. So, and I know I have work to do, so I will just continue to do my work. Just before 9 o'clock, the alarms went off. But once the alarms went off, I knew it's no longer a drill, because I knew it was the alarm was because of something's happening. So, and we were taught, once you hear the alarms, you go into the stairwell, you start getting, you evacuate the building basically. So I got into the stairwell, and the rescuers and all the firefighters and so forth making their way up in the stairwell, and there was lots of people walking down. And so I started to make my way down, and I started passing some of my colleagues because I would move faster than some of them. Obviously some people can't walk as fast. You come down all these stairs and the narrow stairwells. Anyway, so I made my way down to the, it's called the concourse level, where you can get out the building. And I was going to go outside, but one of my colleagues stopped me, and that's because some people who were trapped from the first plane that hit, which was American Airlines Flight 11, it hit the 92nd floor of my building, the first building, World Trade this North Tower. And it cut off all of the stairwells. There were 3 stairwells, and cut off all of the stairwells. And so all of the people who are above the 92nd floor, which is where it hit, they were all trapped. And so many of those people, what they were doing is throwing themselves out of the building because of all the fire and the heat. And so some people died literally from bodies falling on top of them, crushing them. And so when I tried to go out, one of my colleagues luckily stopped me and said, "Don't go out there, it's too dangerous." So I went down to the next level, which was the concourse level, was where all the stores and everything was. And when I got down to that next level, I could see from all the broken glass and everything that was a lot of destruction. And I was thinking 1993, saying to myself, well, it'll probably take a long time for us to repair all of this stuff there. And as I was walking, trying to get out, I heard a noise like something snap. And then I heard somebody say, "Take cover." And the next thing I felt was like this giant tidal wave or tsunami just grabbed me, and I can see the walls start closing in, and then everything just went dark. Unbeknownst to me, what had happened is the South Tower, which was the second tower to be hit by the Flight 175, the next plane, that was hit around the 72nd floor. So it's the 20 floors lower. So there's a higher amount of floors above it. And so it fell at 9:59. So it took 56 minutes before it fell. It was hit at 9:03. Once that fell, it fell in 9 seconds. So that building fell and pancaked down. And so I was trapped in all that debris, basically. I didn't know that. But the next thing I remember, everything just went dark, and I could hear, it was just surreal. I could hear voices, people in pain, and people just, you can't see anything. You can't see any, because it's all dark and everything, but you could hear people moaning and groaning. But the next thing I saw was these bright lights. So they always tell you when you die, you see a bright light. So I thought I was dead, but it was actually the rescuers looking for survivors. And they said, and they had bullhorn to them, because that was the first responders. They just turn on the lights, and they had their bullhorn and say, "If you see the light, come to the light." So I got up and I started to feel my legs, to feel whether or not I'm injured. I could feel my legs. I had a feeling, so I know that I was okay. And I could hear a lady's voice next to me. She sounded like she was in pain. And I reached out to try to see if I can help her. And she felt, you from wars, you must know it. She just felt badly wounded. She said, "Don't touch me, I'm burning up." And she was, I guess she must have been injured from the heat from the plane, from once the explosion took place. And so she, so I felt like I had to try and help this person. But then my eyes felt like it had glass or sand in it, and I couldn't breathe. So I felt like I had to try and find a way to get out. So I started following the rescuers with their lights and everything, and I was able to get out. Once I got outside and I looked around, it looked like a war zone after a bomb blast or something, because it's just all sand. everything is all pulverized and everything. All the fire trucks and everything's all mangled and everything's all over the place. So I felt like I had to get to a hospital. So I started making my way. The hospital is about 3 blocks from the trade center. It's called Downtown Hospital. So I knew the direction where it was. So I started walking in that direction. And a stranger, a homeless person saw me and he said, hey buddy, you need this. And he handed me a handkerchief. And I put it to my head. And I looked at it and it was all blood. So I knew that I had to get to the hospital. So I walked in, they called me the walking wounded. And they flushed my eyes and everything. And they said, oh, your cornea is not scratched or anything, but you got to send you for x-rays. So while I was waiting in there, everything went dark again. And that's because the tower that I was in, the first tower to be hit, came down, and then it turned everything downtown dark because it knocked out all the electricity and everything downtown, including the electricity in the hospital. So, so I said, you know what, let me get out of here because I realized I'm not safe. So I got out of the hospital and I started falling. By now, everybody's walking away from the trade center site. But as you walk in, you could see people's expression, the way they're looking at you. And they're looking like if they see a zombie or something. So I started to look back because I couldn't believe, they were just looking at me. So I looked back and then I didn't see the towers. And then it hit me that that's why people are in shock, that they're really looking at what happened. And that's when it hit me, wait a minute, the towers are gone. That's when I realized that I had to get to another hospital because I realized why I was feeling the way I was feeling. So I ran into one of my friends and he helped me. I got to another hospital and they sent me through x-rays and everything. And luckily I had no broken bones, but they said they didn't know if I had internal injuries. So they had to keep me overnight. And I spent the night in the hospital there. And while I was during the night, the person who was next to me got up in the middle of the night and he was screaming. And he was yelling. And he said, he was having nightmares because I was on the 60th floor. He was on the 91st floor. So he was one floor below. He could see the plane. He could see the pilot's eyes, the plane coming to the building. And so he was delirious. And he was much more injured than I was. His legs were almost severed. But the next day they released me. I was able to get out. And I had to use crutches and everything. And then when I got home, I ran into my brother-in-law. He said, I looked like if I was in a fight with Mike Tyson. I don't know if you guys know who Mike Tyson is, but I was in pretty bad shape. But as you can see, I survived, and I'm one of the survivors. And that's why I work with Tribute Center to tell my story, because in telling my story, I realized that I had an opportunity to talk about my colleagues because I survived, but 84 of my colleagues passed away, including the people I was going to meet with that morning. 2 of them, Jean and Drucky, and her colleagues, they were both going to meet with me and they both died. So that's the reason why I tell the story, because I want to be a voice for them. They couldn't. But the more important thing I always tell people is I'm grateful for the rescues because they got me out. But I'm also recognize how much good came out of this, because even though that was a really, as you can know, it was the worst act of terrorism in our history and everything. On that day, there were so many acts of goodness, like that stranger who handed me his handkerchief. And there were other acts of kindness and goodness in the city that showed, and ultimately that I think overcame all the acts of hate. And so that's why I do this, to spread that love ultimately overcomes hate. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Greg, can we have you tell your story?
Well, first I want to say that it's a privilege to be speaking with the 4 of you, and I want to thank you for your service. I don't think there's anything more honorable than serving in the military, for your country. So thank you for that. My father served in the U.S. Navy many years ago. I think it was 1945, 46. he was stationed on Ford Island in Hawaii. I recently went and visited the Pearl Harbor Memorial, and I was touched by a quote by an ensign from the USS Oklahoma. And he said something that I think people who survive tragedies will always say to themselves. And he said, "Why them and not me?" So, and that is something that I've thought about for the past almost 20 years now. Why did people like Dave and myself survive? Why did the ones that perished, why did they die? And you'll hear a lot of people give basically two reasons to that question. One has to do with divine intervention. A lot of people are very religious, and they believe the providence of God maybe is the reason why they survived. And many others will talk about just the randomness of luck, right? And I think if you look at any tragedy throughout history, that's what you kind of find. People who survive, not really sure as to the reason. And I can't give you an answer as to which one it is. Maybe it's a combination. I really don't know. But all I know is that the people that survived that day, there were many twists of fate for the reason that they survived. And some, they missed the train or they missed the bus that day. Some took a different elevator. Some people changed their airline tickets. Some people might have stopped for a cup of coffee. For me, on that day, there were many twists, for the reason for my survival. So that morning, I was a lieutenant at the time, stationed with Engine Company 24. It's located in Greenwich Village section of Manhattan, about 20 blocks north of the Trade Center. I got in about 8 in the morning, and about 8:47, when the first plane hit the tower, I got a phone call, and it was my wife on the telephone. And she said a plane had just hit the tower. I thought that would be odd because I know we would go to that. And just as I was saying that to her, the ticket came over for Engine 24 to respond. We got down there in less than 5 minutes. I could see a big hole in the North Tower. We were being told that it was a small aircraft, not an airliner. As we arrived, we got off and approached the North Tower, and we could see all the glass in the tower lobby. It was already broken. As we walked in, you could see cracks in the marble floor, and there were dead bodies on the floor. And these were people that had been waiting for the elevator, and the jet fuel, when it exploded, came down the shaft and exploded. The elevator doors open, and people were burned alive right there waiting for the elevator. Went over to the command post to see what was going on and get our orders, when I overheard that all the elevators in the tower were not working, right? So to give you an idea, firefighters carry somewhere between 75 and 100 pounds of gear. In high-rise buildings, we need elevators to get up there and fight the fire. So in any case, eventually they gave the order that we would have to walk up. So we were teamed up with another company, Ladder Company 20, firefighters that I responded with many times, so I knew who they were. And we started going up. Eventually, we would get to the 27th floor. And at that point, we had been going up single file. Civilians were coming down single file. It was pretty orderly. I had one civilian tell me that he saw fire on the 90th floor. So at that point, we knew that we had a long climb. In any case, we stopped off at 27. And the reason we stopped there was because there were 2 civilians. One was a paraplegic confined to a wheelchair, and they could not get out without the use of an elevator. But on the 27th floor, everything was in a condition that is as normal as it is right here with us talking. If there was nothing going on the 27th floor, I didn't think it was urgent to get them out, but at the same time, I didn't think I could leave them alone. So I had one of my guys stay with them, and the rest of us continued up to catch up to ladder company 20. Ladder 20 stopped at the 35th floor, and so we stopped along with them. And at that point, I could tell that all my guys were pretty exhausted. And also on that floor was ladder company 5, which is a company inside the same fire station with me. Engine 33, there was a chief and 2 EMTs. So in essence, we had a little staging area there, and we were just trying to recuperate. Broke into a vending machine, got some water, right, and took a break for about 2 or 3 minutes. And at which time, over the chief's radio came a message: "Mayday, Mayday, get out of the building." I'm certainly sure you're familiar with the term Mayday in the fire department. It's our most extreme urgent call. It's only given 5 times for 5 reasons. When it's followed by get out of the building, it means that the person giving it believes the building is about to collapse. That didn't really make sense to us because high-rise buildings don't have a history of collapsing. So we didn't really take it like a Mayday, but I turned to ladder 5, the officer, and I said, looks like they're abandoning the building. And normally when you hear this, you would basically run for your own life. But we were getting our gear and heading to the staircase. And as we did, all of a sudden, we heard this loud noise. And then the North Tower started to shake violently back and forth. And I can only compare this to being in an earthquake. Again, this is not something that any of us had ever experienced. So we really weren't sure what was going on, but what we didn't know, and what people who might have been watching on television did know, was that the South Tower was collapsing. And when it did collapse, it killed every single person inside of it. There would be no survivors taken out of it. In any case, this seemed like it lasted like a minute or 2, but in reality, it only lasted about 10 seconds. And then the North Tower was standing straight up again. Nothing was shaking, and everything was as it was before. So we headed to the staircase. I heard the officer from ladder 20 on the radio trying to contact a couple of his members who had left without his knowledge and continued up. He couldn't get him on the radio, so he turned to me and he said, I'm going to have to go get him. And I said, okay. I said, well, I have all of my members. We're gonna head down, and I'll meet you outside. So we started to go down, and I told my guys, just stop at 27. Let's make sure our other member's not there. And my hope was that he had started taking those 2 civilians down. But when we got there, the 3 of them were still there down by the elevator. So as I started to approach, out of another hallway came a captain, Billy Burke from Engine 21. Never met him before. And we started to talk about how we would get this civilian, the paraplegic, down. There was an elevator right there with the doors open, but seeing how some elevators had already crashed and burnt, not having any tools to get out of this elevator if we needed to get out, I didn't feel comfortable going into the elevator. I told Captain Burke that I think we're going to have to take him down the stairway. I thought he acknowledged that, and with that, I headed back to the stairway with my members. When I got to the stairway, turned around, I had all my guys, but no Captain Burke, no civilians. I asked one of my members where they went. He said he's going to take him down the other staircase with his company. What I didn't know at the time was that Captain Burke and Engine 21 had found a working elevator that got them to the 24th floor. So they had it somebody was manning that elevator, and he knew there was an elevator only 3 flights below him. Not aware of that information, we went back to our staircase and we continued down. We would eventually get down to the 3rd floor, and by this time, smoke had started to fill the staircase. Not bad enough that we needed our masks, but it was more of a white dust. I didn't really know the reason for this, but I obviously do now. When the South Tower collapsed, all that dust was forced into the North Tower, started going up the building. At the 3rd floor, the stairway was blocked, and another firefighter popped out from the hallway, said he tried to get out. Says the stairway's blocked, you can't get out that way. He says, and I need help with this civilian. He had a civilian that couldn't walk. He was lying prone on the floor. We found a chair, we picked him up. We started to bring him across to a different stairway. When we got there, we saw 4 emergency service unit Port Authority police officers. I wasn't really sure why they were still waiting in the stairway, but one of them had a rope or a belt. We tied this guy into a chair. We started to lower him down the stairway when the chair just broke under this guy's weight. He was a very heavy set man. At that point, I was a little frustrated about how long it was taking us to get out of the building with a mayday to get out. And so I told the officers, I said, grab his legs, we'll grab his arms. And we just dragged the guy down the 3 flights of stairs and out into the lobby. What I didn't know then, what I do know now, was that that stairway was also blocked. But 2 police officers and a firefighter had stayed behind in the lobby, and they had some tools and they forced that door open, allowing us, the rest of us, to get out. We headed to the north side of the North Tower. Some other police officers were leading the way. When we got to the doorway to the courtyard of the World Trade Center, they said to hold up, people are jumping. And then 2 of them went out and they finally gave the okay. And as we went into the courtyard, I said, okay, we made it. I don't need my mask anymore, 35 pounds. I took that off, put it on the ground, and we started to walk through the courtyard. In the courtyard, it was a total whiteout. All I can compare this to is like walking in a blizzard. September 11, 2001, in New York City was a crystal blue sky. There wasn't a cloud, and it was the perfect day. And now outside, you couldn't see more than 10 feet in front of you. Again, I had no idea what had happened, what had caused this, but in any case, we started to go. We walked about 10 or 11 feet. There was some debris there, some chairs, some steel. I started to move this to try to get a path for the guys that were carrying the civilian. And then all of a sudden, we heard a loud noise again, right? To me, it felt like another airplane right on top of us. We all just started to run. I ran a couple of steps, and then all of a sudden, it went pitch black from thick black smoke. Then I thought maybe it was an explosion. At this point, I thought that there would be fire behind the smoke. I ran another 2 steps. I felt what I thought was a shock wave, all this, this wind behind me. And at that moment, I realized that I'm not going to be able to outrun this. My thought was that, my life was about to end. And I just got into the fetal position. I had a couple of thoughts, said goodbye to my family, said goodbye to my wife. I said a prayer. My prayer was, make this painless, make it quick. And got into the fetal position, covered my head. Around this same time, my wife, who was only working 10 blocks north of the Trade Center, had been looking to escape downtown Manhattan. Downtown Manhattan was becoming a ghost town. People, thousands and thousands of people were running for their life over bridges, for boats, anything they could find. She found a taxi with 4 strangers. They started heading north, away from the downtown area. They were in a traffic jam. and over the radio came, the North Tower has just collapsed. And with that, she let out a scream, and she said, "My husband is dead." And then these strangers grabbed her hands and they prayed for my survival. In the fetal position, I was getting pelted with concrete. Nothing that was painful, but it was a constant barrage of rocks. Again, it felt like it lasted about a minute or two. In reality, this only lasted about 10 or 11 seconds. And then there was an incredible calmness. You couldn't hear a sound. I still couldn't see anything other than pockets of fire and craters that maybe went down 6 stories into the sub-basements of the Trade Center. Everyone I had come out with, maybe 15 or 20 of us in all, I could not see anybody anymore. I knew where I was, and all of a sudden in the distance, I saw a light. It was a flashlight. 2 police officers had stayed behind on a stairway that led down to the street area. And I crawled on my belly, got to that staircase, went headfirst down the staircase, got down into the street. I was choking quite a bit, having difficulty breathing, but at this point, the smoke started to lift in the street, and my ordeal was over. I had survived. It would take me till the rest of the evening to find out what happened to the rest of my members from Engine 24, the members that I was responsible supervising. And every one of them had survived also. Engine 24, we all made it. So I look back at this day and I go, wow, I was extremely lucky, me and the members of Engine 24. The North Tower was struck first, but the South Tower fell first. Captain Burke took over a very difficult rescue that I was going to be taken down the stairway. He headed for an elevator. A couple of officers, a firefighter stayed behind, forced open a door that got me out into the lobby. Others led me out, presumably in the right direction. And when the North Tower collapsed, it cut the custom building tower, World Trade Center number 6 and 2. But the part that I was under had held. So all that very lucky. When I tell this story, some people will come up to me, says, Gregg, what you experienced was a miracle. And maybe they're right. Maybe that was a miracle. But there would be no miracle for the other firefighters on the 35th floor. All the other firefighters were killed from ladder 5, engine 33, ladder 20. There was no miracle for some of the officers that were coming out into the out into the courtyard with us. And there was no miracle for Captain Burke and the 2 civilians that I left on the 27th floor. Right. That's pretty much my story. It's a tragedy. It's certainly dramatic. But in all, you guys are in the service, and I'm sure there's a lot of stories of people who have incredible dramatic and traumatic stories. And these are the things that we have to live with. But I thank you for listening, and I thank you for allowing me to share this with you. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thanks, Gregg. Does anybody have questions for Dave or Gregg?
Do you all have any connection to the USS New York? I know we have a lot of memorabilia from 9/11, and now we're getting crew members who are checking on board who don't remember 9/11. Do you have any advice for us of kind of carrying on that legacy on board?
You want to take that, Dave, or you want me to?
You go ahead, Gregg. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, it's an interesting question. I'm looking at the 4 of you, obviously. I don't know whether even you were alive or obviously you were all probably pretty young, so I don't know what you remember. I think in anything in history that's tragic, it's hard to really understand it when you haven't been around it. I mean, and that's why I went to Ford Island. I felt like a desire that I needed to understand Pearl Harbor a little bit more. I think you should try to learn about as much as past history as you can, because I think there's a famous saying that if you don't learn from history, then you're bound to repeat some of the mistakes of that history. That's what I take out of 9/11, and I really don't have any affiliation, anything that I can compare with what's going, on the ship. I really don't know what's on the ship, so I don't have any connection there.
The Tribute Museum and the September 11th Families Association does have a connection to the ship. In fact, we adopted the ship. And we went to the christening and we went to the commissioning. And some of us, myself included, were lucky enough to take a Tiger cruise a few years ago, which was fantastic. And we got to see a lot of the ship and meet a lot of the crew. Unfortunately, as crew changes over the years, all the people we knew on the ship left. And we're so thrilled now to reconnect with the ship. And we'd really like to hear your stories. So, and what you do on the ship and what it's like to be on the ship. If you could tell us a little bit about that, we would love that.
Being a culinary specialist on board the USS New York, it is stressful at times due to the constant. Everyone has to eat 3 times a day, every single day. But the reward portion of it is when you get to see people smile from great food that you've either teach someone how to make or you've personally made yourself. And especially making good food when we have a Tiger cruise and people have never been on the ship and it's their first time and they get to come and see or taste the food that we're in the kitchen making. So I think it goes both ways. It could be stressful and a lot of work, but it also could be just as rewarding, especially receptions and fleet weeks when we get to put on the show. And yeah.
I can testify to the good food on the ship. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ensign McAlchis, I am just now taking over electrical officer. I was in main propulsion this past year. But a little about me, I came from the Naval Academy. So during ship selection, I chose the USS New York. A big part of that decision was because of the legacy that we heard in those 2 stories, the impact that so many Americans have and that connection so many Americans have with 9/11, and just the stories that come out of, like they said, like the genuine just teamwork and generosity of New Yorkers at that time, and for the attacks at Arlington as well. Just the incredible spirit of it, I think, kind of carries on. Even though the ship isn't in New York, it still carries on that legacy, and throughout the crew as well, just the work ethic. This crew has been through a lot in the past couple of years. We've had a very high tempo operability, and it's just incredible to see how much they're able to pull through and just keep going at it and make sure that New York is still ship shape and ready to respond wherever it is around the world. So that's really what drew me to it, and I'm definitely inspired by it, especially through my job as public affairs officer as well, getting to interact with people like you all, and just kind of remember that.
Hello, I'm Gunner's Mate Second Class Cassidy. As you know, as a Gunner's Mate, I work with the ship's weapon systems, which includes we have 2 30mm cannons, and our crew serve weapons are higher caliber 50 cal and 240, which is actually what I'm an expert in. And then of course our smaller caliber. I came to the New York in February in the midst of a deployment, and I've done my job prior on a DDG 68 USS the Sullivans, and I love my job, I do. But one of the best things I've noticed with the New York is they carry an echo wherever they go, wherever they stop, wherever they've been. And that is the resiliency of this crew. I was not expecting that, and to be able to adapt and just have them take me with me. And it's an honor. It really is. I was prepared to serve on board the New York, but I don't think I was actually prepared until I actually went in depth to that history and got myself more involved to it and started asking the right questions. And that's when it truly became, from the bottom of my heart, an honor to serve.
Hi, I'm EM2 Kim. I'm a electrician's mate in New York. I'll say there was a lot of things that I've learned as an electrician, and when I first came on board, and I was amazed at how a lot of people knew what they were doing and very motivated. I was surprised when I first came on board. I didn't know why the ship's name was New York. And when I came on board, I saw all this 9/11 stuff around the ship, and it was intriguing and interesting. And I didn't know much about the story until now. And I'm really glad that I am serving in the ship that I am right now.
Thank you. Can I ask you if any of you have memories of September 11th, of the attacks? You all look way too young to.
I did. So CS2 Fuqua, I was in second or third grade, one of the two. And I remember we'd never seen a teacher frantic in my school, because usually in elementary, everyone was calm and just, kind of going about their day every single day. There was no excitement ever at school. But that particular day, the principal ran in every classroom and forced the teachers to turn the television on so we could all watch what was happening. And as a kid, we're sitting style on the floor. The teacher, she's watching, crying. And so we're like confused, but then, you start to process things and, 1 + 1 and put the pieces together. And then when we seen the second tower go down, that was when it was like everybody's face was just kind of in awe, like, is this real? I think that was the most common thing was, is this actually real? Is this like happening right now? So, and then, you get older and you realize that that was a day that we could never get back, and that was actually happening. So I will never forget that day. And I've been to the museum in New York once, and just being in that museum, it was just incredible and powerful. And just to have that memory for me as a child, and then go to see some of this stuff in person, it definitely makes you more proud to serve on board the USS New York, definitely. And so that was my experience, elementary.
I was in preschool at the time, so I don't remember.
I do remember something similar. I think I was in first grade. I remember crisscross applesauce on the train track rug. And I do remember the devastation of my teachers. I did not see my principal that day. I did see my sisters. I have one older and one younger in grade and in age. And we were all together because our mom was on her way to pick us up. As soon as they shut off the TVs, school was out. And I remember my dad came home and we sat together as a family. And I see my parents crying. I didn't really understand why. I just knew it was a bad day. But my parents were very affected, and we just made sure to have a nice family dinner that night. And I just remember my sisters especially. So I was very happy we were together.
I was 1 year old. So.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, I was 1 year old, but I did ask my mom how it was. We were in South Korea, and it was, worldwide, so we could still see it from the TV. My mom was crying. Even though it's a different country, it's a tragic thing to, experience. So she was just telling me, because I was getting hold on. I didn't know much about it, but that's what happened. My mom was looking at the TV from South Korea.
Yeah. Well, people from 91 different countries were murdered here. So it was truly a global event. Thank you so much for sharing that. How has COVID-19 affected the ship? What's it like with that?
Well, we were actually on deployment when COVID-19, the pandemic kind of broke out last year. So for the most part, it isolated us a lot during deployment. But then coming back to a whole new way of life was definitely kind of shocking. We had having to wear masks and, you know, not see our family members right when we got home was definitely tough. But I mean, it's definitely, it's been a tough environment, but I think we've adapted pretty well on board, overcoming, you know, with varying our work schedules and wearing masks and distancing and doing Zoom calls. I mean, the best we can to just kind of keep going with what we've got. So, what about you guys? Yeah.
Same, pretty much covered it.
Yeah. One of you said something earlier that I'm just ridiculously curious about. It has nothing really to do with what we've been talking about, but someone mentioned the term boat alligator. Can you explain that to civilian?
Oh, yeah. Bold alligator is pretty much where you bring out every force that we would possibly use. Like we have AAVs and LCACs vehicles, and we pretty much put those in the water, and you chase one another, and you have the helos that come into play. It's pretty much like one big tactical game in the water, in the middle of the ocean, pretty much. But you have multiple ships in the ARG playing together, basically.
I see. Thank you.
I will say, at least I've been to the 9/11 Museum in New York, but I think this is the first time I've actually been able to speak to survivors and heard their stories. And it's just, I want to say it's very impactful because it's very easy for us to get wrapped up in our day-to-day jobs here that don't necessarily have very much to do with what happened on that day. But getting to hear that and remember, you know, kind of the legacy or where this ship started, it definitely brings it home, and it's just very impactful to hear. I know I've grown up throughout, you know, every year remembering 9/11 in different ways, but never actually hearing it person to person. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome. You might be confusing us with the National Museum. There are two. We're the first museum. Yeah, the National Museum's the big one with the crushed fire trucks and stuff inside. And we can't compete with them in terms of spectacular artifacts. But what we have are the people. We have 900 guides with incredible stories. So every day people come to us to meet people like Dave and like Greg and hear their stories. And we certainly invite you and all the crew to come to tribute whenever you want. And we would love to have you next Fleet Week if you're here. And we certainly hope you are. Definitely invited. And anytime you or your families want to come to tribute, by all means, you're always incredibly welcome. Thank you so much for this. We appreciate it so much. And fair winds and following seas to you. And take care.
Thank
you.
you. You as well.
Thank you.